Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing well, Mark. How's everything going with you?
It's going well. It has been a very long time
It
since we've done
has.
this.
It has.
Yeah, a few months. So the last we met, at least in our podcast, we had the pleasure of meeting Dr. James Basker of the Gilder Lehrman Institute, and that was really a great experience. And big thanks to Dr. Basker for his hospitality and being really such a nice guy, and it was a wonderful experience to meet him and his staff there, and just want to thank them.
Oh, the number of people that I told how impressed I was with that meeting, you know, working with him. That was a great experience.
Yeah, he was really a gentleman, and has forgotten more about American history than I'll ever be fortunate enough to know.
I agree. Me too.
Well, definitely me more than you for sure. I mean, that's your wheelhouse, but there's so much to talk about, and hopefully you have been enjoying your summer hiatus, and hopefully the teachers and administrators that are listening to this are enjoying a little bit of time off and a little R&R, well deserved R&R. And we have a few topics on tap for today, and the first one is an article that was on Finland and talking about why Finland is not necessarily it's not necessarily a good comparison to compare Finland to the United States. And I know that you had taken a look at this article as well, Nick. And what were your thoughts about the article?
You know, did you happen to see the Michael Moore movie, Where to Invade Next?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you are you familiar with the
Yes.
the movie?
Hmm.
He does go to Finland to compare us educationally, and I thought it was his like least divisive movie that he had ever made, but
That's a relative term to be
that is
sure.
right. I agree. But the part about Finland, I remember sharing this with my students is number one, how they just do not give homework in Finland. How they believe that everything should be done, you know, in the classroom, and that home is simply to encourage kids to either relax or read. And that was among many other comparisons, of course, that he put in. But that was one big part. So then, when you sent me this article um, this morning, I was going right back to thinking about the interviews he had with the teachers, and it just makes me realize, you know, we're not the same country at all, and it's so difficult. Everybody wants us to have the same results as them, but it can never happen.
I agree. Before we get into the Education Week article, which is the one that I sent you, I was just doing some research for the show just to get a sense of what Finland does well. And I came across an article from Business Insider, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And it covers four reasons why Finland is so good. And here are the four very briefly. One is better standardized tests. Two, this is, again, according to Business Insider, more time for play. And statistically, they've concluded that Finnish students spend about 2.8 hours a week on homework, and American students spend about 6.1 hours. Three, college is free, which is obviously something very huge, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And the elevated nature of the teaching profession. And that has to do with salary and, of course, the way that teachers are held in higher regard or very high regard there. So, those are four very huge uh, differences between the United States and Finland. And I have to stop saying huge because I feel like I'm doing Jimmy Fallon's impression of Donald Trump, but not nearly as well. So let's break these down one at a time. So one, the first one, better standardized tests. So according to the article, Finnish students only take one standardized test during their entire primary and secondary schooling, versus the United States, where our third through eighth grade students are taking annual tests. And then, of course, a host of additional tests on top of that in New York State, and I'm sure in a number of states across the country. So, explain how you think those differences impact educational outcomes.
Well, I can tell you in the movie, when he interviewed the students, they said that they almost never take multiple choice tests. He went down the line with all the students, and I think uh, I think our students get trained. I hate to use that word, but they get so used to simply taking these multiple choice, which becomes for many of the students multiple guess tests, that they really lose all relevance to what we're trying to evaluate from the students and how much and how well they are performing. Um, I'm very much anti the standardized testing that's been going on in our and we've said this before. You know,
Hmm.
it's okay to use a test to evaluate progress, I think, but not when the stakes are so high for teacher accountability and even for student promotion.
And we're doubling down on the multiple choice aspect of these exams through the park tests that are going to be administered via computer, which our district has been piloting or did pilot last year. And I know that that's been going on throughout New York State. And I imagine other places around the country, some states have probably already made a significant transition to the computerized exams, and others are following suit. The plan is that at some point in the next few years, once the infrastructure is in place, that all students will take their exams on the computer. We are in many ways are going in the wrong direction there because we're trying to find ways to deliver these multiple choice exams more easily, which I guess will save some paper, which is nice, but conceptually it's moving in the wrong direction.
Well, it'll definitely save paper, and that's a great thing. But if you ask the educational leaders if they believe that multiple choice exams are the best indicator of student progress, or are the multiple choice exams the cheapest to grade, I would be curious what their answer would be.
So they give two examples of questions from the Finnish National Matriculation Examination, which is taken at the end of high school. And so, since we just talked about multiple choice exams, let me know which multiple choice would be the best answer for these questions. One, in what sense are happiness, good life, and well being ethical concepts? Is that B? And the second question is Karl Marx and Frederick Engels predicted that a socialist revolution would first happen in countries like Great Britain. What made Marx and Engels claim that, and why did a socialist revolution happen in Russia?
Wow. Just like an American test.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So the second issue or the second differentiation that Business Insider mentions is more time for play. So I already talked about the difference in homework time, but in Finland, they also provide 15 minutes of break time for every 45 minutes of instruction, whereas US students typically get less than a half an hour of recess each day. And they call that the deficit of play for US students. And that may contribute, according to this article, to additional anxiety and other mental health issues. So, what's your thought about expanding free time?
I think it's essential if you want students to be well adjusted and enjoy coming to school. I mean, just think of the concept of a student's doing poorly in school. So what do? We take away the one thing that they like. Uh, I mean, it's in the other article. We've said this. I've said this
Hmm.
numerous times. A student is really doing poorly in math. So let's give them two math classes. It
Hmm.
doesn't work. It's not going to be effective. And so many people are trying, so many schools are trying to do that. And I don't think Finland has the same approach.
Well, they definitely don't have the same approach, and that does speak to the article by Peter DeWitt in Education Week, which you had cited, just a moment ago. And you're 100% right that the fix is to just sort of double down on more of the same versus coming up with some other significant alternatives or just a totally different way of looking at things. But I would argue that those two things, while they're considerable, they don't hold a candle to the third one and the fourth one, but the third one in particular. And the third one from this article is college is free. And I know this was a big talking point in Bernie Sanders campaign, and I'm not coming out and supporting Sanders or anything else. But let's just explore this for a moment. When we're talking about free college, we're not just talking about the 4 years. We're not just talking about what that means in the short term. We have to talk about what that means in the long term. And the most important thing, I believe, and I know we've discussed this briefly in podcasts over the past year, but closing the gap and lowering the levels of poverty, those are the most important issues of our day, and they directly contribute to educational outcomes and educational growth, or our failures as a school system. So when you look at some of these statistics, it's really crazy. So the first one is from UNICEF, and it talks about relative child poverty in 35 economically advanced countries. And just for the sake of people who are listening and not looking at the graph, they're basically defining that as children who are living in relative poverty, defined as living in a household in which disposable income, when adjusted for family size and composition, is less than 50% of the national median income. In Finland, that rate is 5.3%, which is second only to Iceland out of 35 economically advanced countries. And the United States is 23.1%. And you don't need to talk about any programs or testing or anything else. You just need to look at that statistic, and that will tell you everything that you need to know about where education is and why we're not Finland and why we're not any of these other countries that are beating us, because we have an unacceptably high rate of child poverty, and you can't beat the real impact of poverty on a child or on a child's family with a test, with giving them an iPad, with anything like that. You have to break the cycle of poverty first, and you have to break its back before you can really make any kind of significant and meaningful strides in closing the opportunity and education gaps and bringing our country to where it should be, as a leader in the world when it comes to how we educate our kids.
Well, there is another statistic when you're comparing the United States to Finland. We have over 300 million people. They have 5.4 million. It's very difficult to make comparisons between the two countries. When you're talking about the poverty levels, and I'm sure you want to expand on that and talk about college,
Hmm.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. The failures of our educational system, I believe, are the inability to deal with students in poverty. I don't think the top schools in America are struggling to produce excellent students. I really don't. I think we have plenty of school districts all across this country that do a great job that would rival Finland.
Hmm.
But we educate everybody, and we have over 300 million people living here, and
That's
Finland
right.
doesn't. It's just so we can take aspects of what Finland does. I think that's what any great school system would do. You find what's working and you try to bring it to your, locale. But well, I'd like to hear you because I think we may be disagreeing on the free college issue anyway. But
Well, I definitely touch upon the free college issue in a second because it speaks to where I wanted to go with my argument. But the second statistic that was very eye opening for me was and I did a little digging before the show. I looked at the census from 2011, and when it comes to languages spoken at home and the English speaking ability of, well, it's a state breakdown, but I'll give you the aggregate. In Finland, it's about 94% of the people in their homes speak Finnish well. And according to the census from just a few years ago, 7% indicated that they don't speak English at all, and 15.4% indicated that they spoke English not well. So that's about 22.5% of the people who filled out the census. And let's not forget that there are how many millions of undocumented people who are in our school systems, and there's a very strong likelihood that English is not spoken as a first language in those homes. either at all or well. So you're talking about, let's just even stick to the census for a moment. You're talking about a quarter of the country that doesn't speak the language that we have written all of our textbooks in and that we've designed all these exams in, and so on and so forth. Um, and this is not me advocating that everybody should speak English, but it's talking about a huge difference between us and Finland, where language is a barrier that we experience at levels that they don't have to. That's a major hurdle that has to be cleared. And you know as well as I do, you could be two-thirds of the way through the year and you get a new student enrolled because the plane just landed from pick a country, and here they are, first day in your classroom. It's the first day that they're even hearing English in this type of way. So those are hurdles that we have to face here, and our teachers have to face here, that Finland does on a much, much lower level, and that's significant.
And you could list 10 other hurdles like that. There are so that the problem that we have is that we want every student to follow the same guidelines and expectations, and that does not work. We have students all throughout the country who are facing different challenges, and to say that everybody has to meet the same graduation requirements and go on the same path, and then what disappoints me the most is telling every kid that he or she should be going to college, because I don't believe that's the answer for everybody either. So so many of our schools are really, they're pipelines to jail. Well, who's to blame for that? Our policymakers, who are expecting every kid to be doing a rhetorical analysis of somebody's writing, and that's not that's nice for many of our students, but for others it isn't.
Here's my rationale for college being free. First of all, when you look at the top countries, when you look at educationally speaking, the Finlands of the world, the Chinas of the world, Singapore, etc., they are providing college for the students. Now, in China, of course, we know it's very, very competitive. They have to take one test, and if they don't do well on that test, then they basically have lost their opportunity for their lifetime. I'm not advocating for that type of draconian system, but when you give people access to college that is affordable, so whether it's free or more affordable, we could discuss that. But that's when you start to take major steps in breaking the cycle of poverty. One of the reasons why there's childhood poverty to the level that there is because in many of those homes, those parents, either one or both of those parents, are not college educated, and that perpetuates the cycle. So if it would put a major dent in the cycle of poverty to give away, reasonably priced or free college education, then I feel that it's worth it. And I'm not just talking about people who qualify, for certain types of aid. I'm talking about making it more accessible to people so they can then become, I guess, agents of change for the future generations, so they can basically promote the importance of college and education in their own homes with their own children. That's I don't know what else we can do. I mean, we make speeches all day long, or politicians do at least. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on all kinds of assistance and programs and so on, and they don't work by and large, in really solving the problem in large numbers. They help out individuals in certain instances, but systemically they don't help, because we've been doing it for 40, almost 50 years now. If I go back to Johnson's administration, and so it's not bearing fruit. So we need something different, and that might be one of the things that we could do.
All right, my turn now.
Fire away.
Fire away. First of all, there is a stark difference between free and more affordable college. So we do have to, if you're going to talk about free college, my argument against would be very strong for the following reasons. I have read that 30% of college students do not last after year one. After year one. I have read that 75% of students who need remediation never graduate. I do not want to give free college to students who I do not believe are even remotely prepared to handle it. I would much rather take whatever money it is you're going to use to pay for it and quadruple the social services programs in high schools to get kids the help that they need to be prepared, whether the future is for a job or for college. Because we are sending so many kids to college is free for a lot of people today. There are a lot of students that get to go to school for free on grants and aid programs. And I'm sure that those kids are part of that number that are never even coming close to seeing year four. We cannot send kids to college unprepared to handle it. And I certainly don't want to pay for it. Now, if you want to say reduce the cost, of course, I think I, when I hear how much these colleges cost right now, it's horrifying. I mean, there's just
It's criminal.
it's
It's not even
criminal. Yeah.
horrifying.
You can't.
$65,000-$70,000 a year,
Yeah.
including room and board. That's unconscionable.
Right. And we just all have to do is typical, what rate of inflation, and it's just
Right.
going up far greater than everything else. So that I would be open to, finding ways to try to bring down the cost. Try to find ways where the student loan programs are much more affordable. You're willing to put certain years into service in the country, and we pay for some years. I'm open to all those things.
Yeah,
I'm
well, we've been
just
doing that for a long time now.
right.
That's the GI Bill.
Right. I'm just very much against sending people to college to fail. And I think we do that far too often. They're not ready for the skills. Did you happen to read Matthew Berry's fantasy football preview article on ESPN?
I didn't.
You did not. Okay. So,
Not yet.
do you know who Matthew Berry is?
Yes, I do. He's the
Okay.
guru.
A very talented writer, extremely talented. You could use his writing in class. He started his draft day manifesto article this year, writing about a friend of his who went to freshman orientation with his son, and said it was at a small elite private school. Obviously, didn't use the name of the
Mhm.
school, but said about 1,500 kids. And then he said they had their weekend orientation planned, and the parents had a certain place to go. And then his friend had to go to a special meeting with the president. And he
Mhm.
found it odd because other parents didn't get that invitation. And then the president specifically said to his friend and I guess the other groups, well, you see all the nice things we have here. If you'd like your children to still have this, we need more donations. And then went on to say, when your child screws up because you know that they'll screw up, you do want them to get a second chance, don't you?
Oh my God.
Now, this is all, I mean, this is ESPN, so everybody, I'm not saying anything. And that is the country we live in right now. Whether we like it or not, and obviously you and I don't, if you have money, you get all the benefits. That's the way it is. And by the way, if you're wondering why this isn't a fantasy football article, he then spun it into your draft should be focused on minimizing risk. You should take the safest players and take the safest approach. And he goes, we all know our kids are going to screw up. And for that guy, the safest approach is to donate money to the school so that when the kid does screw up, he won't get kicked out. It's terrible. It's depressing.
It's like game theory. That's the dominant strategy.
But it's the country. It's the way our country is right now. I mean, I know I sound like Elizabeth Warren, but she's right. The game. So now the question is, how do you deal with that? And to me, the great equalizer, and I know I'm biased, we work in high school. To me, the great equalizer is to help as many kids as we can on the secondary level. When they get to us, it's now transition time. Are they going to lead a life where they can prosper? Because you and I both know that there are plenty of kids who we've taught who have come from poverty and have risen above and have done wonderful things.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I've taught kids whose father was a police department police officer, and has gone on to Harvard and Yale. It does happen. But and there's also plenty of stories, obviously, of kids that are going directly to jail. And maybe not in our school, but it's happening all over.
Mhm.
Our secondary public school system is where we should be able to help kids, direct them to best meet their future goals. And we can't now because all we're told is worry about some ridiculous standardized test at the end and not and we should be having discussions with kids about, I'm very sorry that this school costs $60,000. Let's sit down and let's figure out, if you go to this school, what's your, is it worth it for you to spend all that money? Because these students, they don't have the resources that the rich kids have to make that decision. And we don't have the time to help them. And now I got angry.
I didn't mean to make you angry, but
No, that's what you did.
no, but
It's
I agree with it. I agree with everything you're saying. And while we're on the topic, then you may as well fund pre-K programs as well and start educating kids and creating an educational environment for them when they're younger, because that will also provide better outcomes.
oh, obviously, I believe it starts from the beginning. Um, but I just feel like when they get, we can't change what's happened in the past, just like we can't change what their parental situation is, just like we can't change what their financial situation is, but we can help them to make the right decisions. And it doesn't happen in the course of one exit meeting with your guidance counselor junior year. When the guidance counselor has what, a caseload of 300, and in the city, what is it, 500 students?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm
Yeah,
asking. That
something like
wasn't.
that. Hmm.
How do we expect these kids to actually get the help and the advice and the guidance that they need to make these decisions? And the fortunate ones, they're going to do very well because there are plenty of Americans who are doing very well. But the gap just continues to widen. And I just personally believe that to change that, I just don't think free college is going to be the difference. Whereas I do think better utilization of time in high school could,
I
if
think
that
that's a
makes sense.
very fair point, and we're going to pay for it as a society one way or the other.
Right.
We're either going to pay for the prisons,
Yep.
we're going to pay for the social safety nets, we're going to pay for the welfare, we're going to pay for the health insurance. We're going to pay for it one way or the other. That's how our society has been structured. I know there are lots of people who would like to fight to change that, but as it stands right now, we're going to pay for it one way or the other. I'd rather see students come in and have the additional supports and have the educational opportunities, and I would like to see college become more affordable for them. And I know that people can say that there's in New York there's the CUNY system and the SUNY system, and that's wonderful, and that is subsidized heavily, and that does provide a great education for students, but it's not enough nationally, in my opinion, and we need more. We need more opportunities and more access. Uh, anyway, moving on to I could go on forever.
Moving on to happier
Moving
times.
Moving on to point four, in Finland, teaching is one of the most revered professions, and in Finland, there, according to this article, is a relatively high barrier to entry compared to other countries. So, and salary wise, the average Finnish teacher makes somewhere around half of what a doctor makes. So the average Finnish teacher makes somewhere around $45,000, and a doctor, excuse me, maybe about 37,000 or 40,000. A doctor makes about 75,000. So a little less than half. In the United States, the average teacher makes about 50 or 55,000, and the average doctor makes over 200. And that's a problem. And to go back to Peter DeWitt's article, he addresses that in a segment or a section that he calls "The Way We Talk About Teachers," and he cites that famous horrible quote that we all know and hate, which is those who can do and those who can't teach. And we hear that over and over again, and it's so it's so disgusting and offensive. And he also makes reference to, how the back to school commercials come on and the parents are so happy to get their kids out of the house and the kids are dreading going back to school, but at least they can get a nice backpack and a pair of sneakers at Target or Walmart or wherever. And it just paints education in such a poor light. And more recently, teachers have been blamed, at least in New York State, I know, for being the ones who broke the economy in 2007 because of our pensions and so on and so forth. And so all this vilification doesn't help promote the or paint the best picture of school and education and teachers, and that could be demoralizing for teachers and for kids alike.
Yeah, I don't know how you change that. I think there are teachers all throughout this country that are greatly respected by their individual communities, and I think that, like any other profession, some of them are going to be looked down upon. Overall, if you think the image of teaching is negative, the only way I can think about changing that is by teachers trying to earn greater respect by working harder, and I'm not coming down hard on teachers, but I don't know how you can't really change somebody's image by asking people to think differently about them.
It reminds me of a story that I had been told once. I had gone to an AP workshop, and it was AP World History. And the teacher was a legendary high school AP World History teacher. He taught it forever. And he went out to Egypt on a Fulbright scholarship, and they had something that night where they were being honored. And so he had some opportunities to during the afternoon to walk around and just do some sightseeing. And he came upon this building, and they were setting up all these stanchions and this red carpet and so on. And he thought, it's like a movie premiere going on. So he asked the person, what's going on here tonight? And the man turned to him. He said, "The Fulbrights are coming tonight." So that gave me chills when I heard that story because it just spoke to how respected teachers were. And I know how hard teachers work to make an impact, a positive impact in the lives of their students, and that should be respected. Of course, with that said, there are some people, just like in every profession, there are a minority of people whose actions make it very difficult to like people in that profession.
Right.
And
This might not be a great analogy, but and please don't get too segued. But after watching the Republican and Democratic conventions, obviously it paints both candidates in the brightest of lights that you could possibly,
mhm,
you know, come across. And yet they both have what the highest negative ratings of any modern day
mhm,
candidates. So should Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton tell people, please like me because I'm very nice? Or do they have to go out there and try to convince people?
right.
You know, you can't just, as a teacher, I think we have to earn it. Again, if it's a bad analogy, I apologize, but I know that I myself and many teachers I know will constantly try to improve, work harder, care for the kids. Um, they notice, communities notice when teachers really go out of their
That's
way,
true.
and they do. And uh, cops are in the same boat. You know, you can't. I think we're at a difficult time, obviously, but I don't think we can just ask or demand. I think it has to be earned.
Actually, a funny story. When I first started teaching, and I had a sixth grade class in Brooklyn, and I had a student in every occasion, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, you name it. I would get a gift from the mom, and it was the same gift. It was a flannel shirt, size medium. Now, I haven't worn a size medium since I was in maybe 6th or 7th grade, and, somewhere I think I probably still have them because I don't throw anything away, as my wife will attest, and, I have those medium flannel shirts, but the thought meant everything, and what she was trying to communicate and her appreciation, and I have every single note that or every card, every note that any student has ever given to me, and I keep them because they're the reason why I do what I do, and they're the reward, the emotional reward for doing it. So, um, I'll never get rid of those. Those mean the world.
And I'm sure that there are teachers with medium flannel shirts all over the country that have garnered the respect of of students and parents alike. So I know that a lot of the educational theorists and writers they love to say things like in other countries they revere teachers more than we do here. I know that that's one of their big complaints, but I don't see how that we can't just wave a magic wand, and make that happen. That's going to happen over time.
I know, but
It's a pipe
here
dream.
they do the opposite, right? Here, there are states that are going after teachers' pensions. There are states that are not keeping their promises to teachers, like New Jersey. Um, that's that is what I'm talking about. It's because they of the attitude that they have towards the work that these professionals have done over a lifetime, and they completely disrespect it. And they feel like that's if they have to make a cut, that's where the cut can be made, and that speaks to the quote, those who can do and those who can't teach. They're held in very low regard, and their political decisions are echoing that, and it's not only hurtful emotionally, it's hurtful economically, and it's threatening to destroy the lives of thousands and thousands of people who have given to the system as a dedicated civil servant, and the arrangement was that every year I'm going to lose money based on the level of education that I have and the level of talent that I have and ability that I have, but the deal is that when I retire, then I will receive this pension, and that will be the deferred payment. And to take away that deferred payment is just not only is it not fair, but it's downright damaging to people economically who are trying to, live out the rest of their lives on what they thought was going to be a anticipated income.
Yeah. Topic for another day on that one.
Fair enough. So there was just to jump to the methods lab. There was a really interesting article that was I think yesterday in the New York Times. Actually, I'm sorry, it was Sunday Review. So we're recording this on a Sunday, so it was today's paper, and the title was "What Babies Know About Physics and Foreign Languages." And I thought this was just a great little article that was very enlightening and eye opening, and spoke to how young babies and toddlers actually learn. And what were your thoughts about this article?
I don't know an awful lot about like brain science and how people learn. And I think for me, sometimes I don't give enough credit to the importance of that. I think that's what I got a little bit out of the
Hmm.
article. I sometimes think that, well, there's, different learning styles. I
Hmm.
understand that, but that it's far deeper. And maybe this is the type of science work that could maybe help in terms of like staff development for teachers, for them to really understand some of the more scientific aspects of
Hmm.
learning.
One experiment that's mentioned in the article I thought was particularly interesting. The long and the short of it is that the two researchers from Johns Hopkins showed 11-month-old babies what they called a magic trick, and they made a ball appear like it was passing through a solid wall. And then another experiment, they made it as if a toy car rolled off the end of a shelf but remained suspended in thin air. And when the babies received the toys, the ball and the car, they immediately started to test the laws of physics because something just didn't jive in their minds, that they took the ball and tried to like bang it into the wall to see if it's something with the wall. And they kept dropping the car to see if basically gravity was really working, or did the car defy gravity. And I just thought it was so brilliant. We tend to underestimate what babies know, and it's not just learning. It's not just what they learn to do. It's how they reason at such a young age. To me, that was what was so mind-blowing about this article.
It would be a wake-up call to teachers who might possibly be doing the same type of lessons, let's just
Yeah,
say, for the last 20 or 30 years, not understanding that children are changing, and the way they learn, and and what's creative to you is certainly not creative to them. We have to give them more freedom. I mean, even the last line of the article was just perfect. We don't have to make children learn; we just have to let them
that's
learn.
right.
And could it get any better than that? I mean, teachers so often just want to say, this is what you have to learn. Let's learn it, and let's learn it my way.
Mhm.
Instead, and that's always something that you focus on all the time, is that you just love when you let the students, take you on the
That's right.
journey. But to tie this all together, I do think that's the approach that takes place in Finland. I really do.
Right.
I think that they have we throw around student centered, Mark, so easily, but I don't think we actually understand what that means.
That's right.
And I think that's what they do in Finland. But my problem is that that's a wonderful philosophy and paradigm to have for so many of our students. But it's not going to work with the child who brings a gun to school, which I know is rare, but it does happen. And it's not going to work with the student who is severely clinically depressed and needs guidance and social work. And that's my frustration. I know I get so angry, is that we have some students that it doesn't matter what's going on in the classroom. They need something different to help them get through the day, let alone to get them through graduation. But these theorists, in my opinion, they think that there's just, we can just change the whole system, and every child is going to learn that way.
And I think that while the numbers are growing, you're still talking about relatively small numbers given the size and scope of the system. But the numbers are increasing, and we are not meeting the needs of those increasing numbers of students who are experiencing those types of troubles and need that kind of support. You're 1,000% right. But just to go back to the article for a second, the teacher says, or the experimenter says in this article, I'm going to show you how my toy works. And that's sort of that direct instruction, which is there's only one way to do this. Let me show you how.
Right.
Don't even bother thinking about another way because I've already showed you the way that it works. Versus presenting the toy and then asking, I wonder how this toy works. And then you open up a world of possibilities. It's the same thing why we always marvel. You see the little YouTube video of the 12-month-old or the 18-month-old or the 7-month-old who's FaceTiming grandma or whatever it is, but the baby can't even speak yet or can't even walk yet. They're experimenting. They're watching, they're learning, they're experimenting, they are thinking, they're processing. That's one of the things that they mention in this article, which again, another thing that I thought was absolutely fascinating. The experimenter's arms were wrapped in a blanket and she tapped her head on the box and in order to make the light up or whatever it was on the box. And the baby, when given the opportunity to work with the box, used its hands because it couldn't understand why the person was using its head. So it didn't just use its head because it saw the experimenter use its head. It tried to figure out another way to make it work without smashing its head on the box. So it's showing us in these few examples what kind of potential toddlers have. And if the toddler has that kind of potential, just imagine the kind of potential that the high school student has, or the junior high school student has, or the college student has. And are we giving them the opportunities to be innovative and to be creative, or are we just saying this is how my toy works?
We're saying this is how my toy works.
I was trying to be optimistic there at the end, and you just kind of yanked the rug out from under me, but so,
Oh, well, I'm sorry
so
about
be
that.
it. Well, I'm glad that we finally got a chance to get together and to do one of these things, and we promise to be a little bit more proactive on getting more of these podcasts out there. And we're very much excited about October 1st. That is the day that we're going to Ed Camp in Nassau County here in New York, and there'll be about 300, 350 educators there for a whole day conference. And we're going to have the good fortune of meeting a number of them and getting to speak with them. So we should definitely get several podcasts worth of interviews there. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a great day.
That's 2 months away, by the
I
way.
know, I know. It's going fast because I remember when it was 6 months away. But so if you'd like to find us on the web, it's stateofedpodcast.com. And if you'd like to ask a question or suggest a topic, you can go to ask at stateofedpodcast.com. That's our email. You could also follow us on Twitter at SOE Podcast. And you'll also find links on our website of the articles that we discussed today and some of those statistics that we shared with you. And thank you very much, Nick, for an enlightening conversation and for finally getting to the mic here. So much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark, for as always, and I will see you next time.
Have a good one.